After seeing the hunters who came back from the dead, Dean felt a chilling fear. It was a cold, heavy feeling in his stomach. He knew in his gut that something very wrong, very powerful, was at work. Ordinary magic could not bring people back like this. These were not just dead bodies. They were twisted versions of his old friends. Dean was sure that only a very strong and dark magic user could have done such a terrible thing. Dean knew he couldn't let this go on. The person who brought the dead hunters back was a huge danger. His main goal was now simple and sharp. He had to find this evil summoner and stop them, no matter what it took. Dean began his search where the city's old buildings stood forgotten. These parts of town were often left alone, perfect for secrets and dark magic. He moved through narrow streets where old houses leaned together like tired giants. He held a small device in his hand, like a special compass for magic. This device glowed faintly when it picked up unusual power. Dean walked slowly, watching its light, hoping to find any strange magical signs. Dean knew that powerful magic, especially dark magic, often left traces. He looked for strange symbols drawn on walls or burnt marks on the ground. He checked for any odd items left behind that could be part of a bad spell. As Dean went deeper into the forgotten places, the air itself seemed to change. It felt heavy and thick, almost hard to breathe. This was the feeling of very old, powerful magic, clinging to everything like a dusty cobweb. Dean's special tattoos, his Aggie mat, usually felt like a part of him. But now they started to tingle and buzz. It was a strange, exciting feeling under his skin, like tiny needles prickling him, telling him something was close. The tingling grew stronger, a clear signal. His tattoos were not just glowing, they were pulsing with a quiet urgency. They were telling him that a very strong magical force, a powerful enemy, was very near. Back in his hidden base, Dean quickly looked through old dusty books and computer files. These were secret records of hunters who had turned bad, those who joined the great cleansing traitors long ago. He searched for clues, hoping for a name. As Dean looked through the old papers, one name kept popping up. It was Lyra. Her name was written in many old reports about dark magic and betrayal. She seemed to be a very important person among the bad guys. The record showed Lyra was a Mangkukulam, a witch who used very dark magic. She was especially known for spells that could control the dead, or even bring them back to life. This was the kind of magic that could reanimate hunters. Everyone believed Lyra had died during the Great Cleansing 15 years ago. She was supposed to have been defeated, gone forever. But now, with the reanimated hunters, it seemed she had found a way to come back, or had never truly left. Armed with Lyra's name, Dean returned to the streets. He now looked for her specific magic. He saw thin, almost invisible lines of dark energy, like faint spiderwebs, leading him deeper into the city's forgotten parts. The magical trails got stronger and stronger. They led him down a very narrow, dark path that ended at an old building. It looked like it was about to fall apart, with broken windows and cracks running up its walls. This building wasn't just old. It was truly hidden. It was tucked away in an alley so narrow and twisted that most people would never even know it was there. Tall, crumbling walls hid it from the main road, making it a perfect secret spot. Small bits of sunlight, barely breaking through tiny cracks in the building's roof, cut through the darkness inside. In these thin beams, tiny specks of dust floated and swirled, dancing in the still, heavy air. As Dean got closer, a strange silence fell. It wasn't just quiet. It was a silence that felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. There were no sounds from outside, no normal noises, just a deep, unnatural quiet. Dean reached out and pushed the heavy wooden door. It made a loud, groaning sound as it slowly opened, like an old monster waking up. The sound echoed through the silent building, loud in the stillness. As the door opened, a sudden rush of cold air swept past Dean. It felt icy and strange, like the building itself was exhaling. The draft smelled of damp stone and something else. Something old and dark, stirring in the depths. Dean held his breath, making himself very still. His body was ready and his senses were super sharp. He listened closely, trying to pick up any sound, any hint of what was waiting for him inside the old dark building. He stepped inside the building, his feet making almost no sound on the dusty floor. His right hand went to his buntot pagi, the special bracelet on his wrist. It was always ready to turn into a weapon if he needed it. Then, all at once, everything around him twisted. The air seemed to shake, and the room itself felt like it was spinning. It was a dizzying, confusing feeling, like the world had suddenly gone upside down. The old cracked walls of the room didn't just move, they seemed to melt away. They turned into a thick, dark fog that swirled and spun around Dean. He couldn't see anything clearly, just the endless twisting mist. Dean's head began to hurt, and his mind felt completely lost. He was dizzy and couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. It was like he was caught in a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. Then, a voice echoed through the swirling fog. It was deep and chilling, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The voice said, "Welcome, Hunter. Your nightmares await." Dean knew it was Lyra. Suddenly, the swirling fog vanished, and Dean found himself in a horrifying dream. It felt too real to be just a dream, a place built from his deepest fears and worst memories. He looked around, and his heart sank. He was standing in the ruins of his clan's home, the same place that was destroyed during the Great Cleansing. Everything was broken and burnt just as he remembered it. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the awful smell of smoke and ash. Beneath that, a metallic smell hung in the air, a scent Dean knew too well. The smell of blood, old and dry, but still haunting. As Dean looked around, he saw them. Faces he knew, faces he loved, were staring at him. But their eyes were empty, and their skin was pale. They were still lifeless figures, frozen in the ruins. These weren't just any faces, these were the hunters he had trained with, the friends he had fought alongside. Now they were all gone, all dead, victims of the terrible event that had shattered his life. Then he saw them, his own parents. They stood among the others, their faces pale, their eyes staring blankly. It was the most painful part of the nightmare, a memory that always twisted his heart. This whole dream, this awful vision, was designed to hurt him. Lyra wanted to break his spirit, to make him give up. She was using his deepest pains to try and make him weak. Dean bit down hard on his teeth, clenching his jaw. He told himself over and over, "This isn't real. It's not real." He tried to push through the pain, to remind himself that he was caught in a trick. He tried to make his Aggie matte tattoos glow, to call on his powers. But it was like his magic was stuck. He could feel it, but it wouldn't come out, trapped by Lyra's dark spell. Above the haunting sounds of the dream, Lyra's laugh rang out. It was a harsh, scraping sound, like stones grinding together. It was a cruel laugh, showing how much she enjoyed Dean's suffering. But this wasn't all happening inside Dean's mind. In the real world, Lyra stood over Dean's body, which lay still on the floor. She watched him struggle in the illusion, her eyes cold and focused. Lyra raised her hands, her fingers spread wide. She began to chant old, dark words. The sounds were deep and guttural, not like any human language. She was preparing for something more. As she chanted, dark shadows began to gather around her. They swirled and twisted, growing taller and thicker. Slowly, they started to take on rough, human-like shapes, rising from the floor. From the shadows, more reanimated hunters pushed their way up. These were not just vague shapes. They were the same zombie-like figures Dean had been fighting. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, ready to obey Lyra's dark command. As Dean looked closer at the zombie-like figures, a cold wave washed over him. These weren't just unknown monsters. They were faces he knew. He recognized their old uniforms, their features, even the way some of them stood. Even though he was now seeing the real zombies, Dean's mind was still trapped in Lyra's nightmare. The painful images of his ruined home and dead family kept flashing in his eyes, making it hard to think clearly. Still caught between the dream and real life, Dean's body started to move on its own. He flailed his arms and legs, fighting against enemies that weren't really there. His body jerked and twitched on the dusty floor, battling phantoms. Outside the illusion, Lyra watched Dean. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. She slowly raised her open hand, pointing it directly at Dean's struggling body. Dark energy gathered around her fingertips. Then Lyra let out a piercing scream. It was not just a sound, it felt sharp and powerful, like a blade cutting through the air. The shout was meant to hurt Dean, to break him completely. The terrible sound slammed into Dean. Even inside the swirling nightmare, the Mangkukulam shout hit him hard. It was like a physical punch, making his ears ring and his vision blur. Dean stumbled, dropping to one knee. A wave of sharp pain shot through his head, like 1,000 tiny needles. The illusion around him flickered, almost breaking, as the real world's pain pierced through. From his ear, a thin stream of dark blood started to trickle. It ran down his neck, a hot, sticky line against his skin. This was real damage, a sign that Lyra's attack was not just a mind trick. The nightmare world around Dean began to crack. Through the fading images of his past, he started to see glimpses of the real room. The dusty walls, the shadowy corners, and something worse, the actual zombies. As the illusion weakened, Dean clearly saw them. The shambling forms of the reanimated hunters, their arms stretched out, slowly moving closer. They were real. They were here, and they wanted to attack him. The sharp pain in his head returned, now even stronger. This time, Dean knew it was from Lyra's direct magic, hitting him in the real world. The Mangkukulam was no longer playing games. She was trying to finish him. With a powerful guttural roar that came from deep inside him, Dean fought back. He forced his mind to break free, shattering the last pieces of the Mangkukulam's illusion. The false world exploded around him. He shook his head hard, trying to clear the dizzy haze from his mind. His vision sharpened, and the painful ringing in his ears slowly faded. He was back, fully in the real world, ready to fight. Lyra stood directly in front of him now, no longer hidden by tricks. Her face was twisted with anger, and her eyes glowed with a sinister dark magic. She was a witch of death, and she looked ready to kill. Around Lyra, the reanimated hunters shuffled forward, their arms stiffly outstretched. They were slow but relentless, a growing wall of dead bodies between Dean and the Mangkukulam. Dean's eyes fixed on his right wrist. The Buntat Pagi bracelet, his special Aggie mat, began to pulse with a strong blue light. It was coming alive, ready to become his weapon. He quickly poured his magical energy into the bracelet. In a flash, the blue light turned fiery red, and the bracelet stretched and twisted. It grew longer and thinner, turning into a glowing flaming whip in his hand. Dean snapped the flaming whip forward. It cracked like thunder and lashed out, striking the first row of zombies. The fire touched them, and they instantly began to sizzle and burn. The zombies hit by the flaming whip didn't just fall. They crumbled quickly. Their bodies turned to dry ash, falling to the floor in dusty piles. The fire completely destroyed them. Dean didn't stop. He moved like lightning, dodging the remaining zombies and Lyra's attacks. He was a blur of motion, a shadow against the dark, always looking for an opening to strike the Mangkukulam. Lyra wasn't done yet. Her voice dropped lower, becoming a quiet, scary hum. She began to say old dark words again, her eyes fixed on Dean. This chant felt like a threat, full of bad intentions. Dean knew he didn't have much time. He saw Lyra starting a new spell. Quickly, he reached for his belt and pulled out a small glass bottle, holding it tight in his hand. This small bottle held a special liquid. It was a regeneration potion, a magical drink that could help him heal quickly. Dean knew he needed to get back to full strength if he wanted to beat Lyra. Dean didn't hesitate. He pulled out the stopper and quickly drank the potion down. As the liquid went down his throat, the sharp pain in his head from Lyra's earlier attacks slowly started to lessen, feeling much better. He didn't stop there. Dean quickly grabbed another bottle from his belt. This one was a strength potion. He swallowed it just as fast as the first, hoping for a quick boost. Right away, Dean felt a surge of new power. His muscles felt tighter, stronger, ready for anything. The potions made him feel big and powerful, fully prepared to take on the Mangkukulam and her zombie forces. With his body feeling stronger, Dean focused his mind. He looked down at his left arm where a tattoo of a powerful wolf rested. It was one of his special Aggie mat tattoos, waiting to be used. He poured his energy into the tattoo. The wolf on his arm began to glow a bright, fiery red. The light pulsed, showing the magic building up inside it. With a burst of light, the wolf tattoo peeled away from Dean's skin. It grew bigger and bigger, taking on a real solid shape. It was no longer just ink. It was a living, breathing wolf made of pure magic. The fierce wolf familiar snarled, its teeth bared. Its eyes glowed with the same fiery red as Dean's tattoos. It was ready to fight, ready to tear into any enemy that stood in its master's way. With a powerful leap, the wolf familiar launched itself at the closest group of zombies. It moved with incredible speed, tearing through the reanimated hunters, making them fall apart like old dolls. Next, Dean focused on his chest where another tattoo rested. This one was a majestic bird, like a phoenix, with long flowing feathers. He pushed more of his magic into it. The firebird familiar burst into brilliant flames. It shimmered with bright orange and red light, then lifted itself from Dean's chest. It spread its fiery wings and took flight, soaring upwards. The firebird circled high above, then dove towards Lyra. It spat bright, hot fireballs at the Mangkukulam, hoping to burn her and break her concentration. Lyra quickly moved, dodging the fireballs. Her dark magic swirled around her, forming a shield that blocked the flames. She was powerful, and the Firebird's attacks didn't seem to hurt her much. In response, Lyra raised her hand again. From the dark magic, a sharp, ghostly blade formed in her grasp. It wasn't metal. It was a spectral blade, made of pure dark energy, shimmering with evil. Meanwhile, far away from the fight, Maya Marquez sat quietly in her own room. She was surrounded by her tarot cards, spread out on a small table. She was trying to read what the future held. Suddenly, Maya felt a strong, urgent feeling. It was like a tug on her heart, a powerful need to look deeper into the cards. Something big was happening, and she needed to know what it was. The cards fell onto the table, landing in a way that made her feel uneasy. They showed grim, dark pictures, symbols of danger and bad news. Her stomach tightened with worry. Among the dark cards, Maya saw clear images forming in her mind. She saw Dean, fighting alone in a dark old building. He was surrounded by danger, battling something terrible all by himself. As Maya looked at the grim cards, her vision became clearer. She didn't just see Dean. She saw a dark, evil power. It was a Mangkukulam, a witch who used very bad magic. This witch seemed to be pulling the strings, making the bad things happen. Then, the vision shifted, and Maya's heart pounded. She saw Dean, struggling against the dark force. A sharp dark blade appeared in the vision, shining with evil light. Maya watched in horror as the blade seemed to go right through Dean, and he fell to the ground. A cold, hard fear gripped Maya's heart. It squeezed her chest, making it hard to breathe. The vision felt so real, so clear that it shook her to her very core. There was no mistaking it. The tarot cards in her vision showed her one terrible thing. This was a vision of Dean's death. It was a clear warning that he was in mortal danger. Without thinking, Maya quickly grabbed her phone. Her fingers were shaking, making it hard to dial. She knew she had to act fast. Every second counted. She immediately called Don, Dean's brother. He was the first person she thought of, the only one who could help in a situation like this. When Don answered, Maya's voice came out urgent and strained. She said, "Don, it's Dean. He's in trouble." Her words were short, but full of worry and fear. Don listened carefully on the other end of the line. Even though he was blind, his other senses were much stronger. He could hear the real fear in Maya's voice, understanding more than just her words. Maya quickly explained what she had seen. She described the dark Mangkukulam and the vision of Dean falling. She told him about the death card that had come up in her tarot reading. Don already knew Dean was out hunting the Mangkukulam, the one who brought the dead hunters back. He had been tracking the same dark energy. He also knew his brother. Dean often rushed into danger without thinking twice. Don had always worried about Dean's reckless nature, even if he didn't show it often. A deep feeling settled over Don. His brother needed him. Despite their arguments and the space between them, family was family. Dean was in danger, and Don was the only one close enough to help. Don moved quickly, with a clear purpose. He called for a ride, telling his driver to get to the location fast. There was no time to waste. Even though he couldn't see, Don knew the old maps of Manila like the back of his hand. He could picture every alley, every turn, every hidden path in his mind. He directed his driver through the city's maze of streets, guiding them quickly towards the forgotten alleys where Dean was fighting. Every turn was precise, every instruction clear. Back at the old building, Dean was fighting hard, but he was starting to get tired. The strength potions were wearing off, and the long battle was draining him. His flaming buntot pagi whipped through the air, but each swing felt a little heavier. The fire flickered, showing how much energy he had already used up. His wolf familiar was still fighting fiercely, tearing through the zombies. But for every one it took down, more kept coming, shuffling forward without end. Their numbers seemed endless. The Firebird familiar still soared, spitting fire at Lyra, but the Mangkukulam's dark magic shields held strong. The flames hit her barrier, but didn't seem to break through. Lyra saw Dean getting tired. She smirked, a cruel smile on her face. She attacked again, pushing forward with her spectral blade, which glowed with sharp, dark energy. Lyra moved incredibly fast. She darted left and right, almost like a dark streak in the dim light. Dean could barely follow her with his eyes as she came closer, trying to land a hit with her glowing blade. Dean quickly brought his flaming buntot pagi whip up. He swung it to block Lyra's fast attack. When the fiery whip hit the dark spectral blade, bright sparks flew everywhere, lighting up the dim room for a second. Dean knew he was getting tired, but he pushed himself harder. He tried to get closer to Lyra, wanting to end the fight. He moved forward, swinging his whip, hoping to find a way past her defenses quickly. Lyra saw his struggle and let out a chilling laugh. It was a cold, sharp sound that echoed through the old building. Her laugh filled the air, mocking Dean's efforts. Suddenly, Lyra stopped moving. She pointed her hand at Dean, and a new illusion appeared right in front of his eyes. It was a trick made of magic, meant to stop him in his tracks. The illusion was Dean's greatest fear, made to look perfectly real. It was so clear, so vivid, that it felt like he was living it all over again. Lyra was hitting him where it hurt the most. For just a tiny moment, Dean's mind stopped. He froze, caught by the powerful illusion. It was only a split second, but in a fight like this, even a tiny pause could be deadly. The illusion showed his entire clan, his family, dead again. They lay motionless in the ruined home, just as he remembered from the Great Cleansing. It was the nightmare that had always haunted him. In that short moment of weakness, Lyra didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, moving with blinding speed towards the frozen Dean. This was her chance to finish him. The spectral blade, made of dark magic, came whistling through the air. It was aimed directly at Dean's chest, right where his heart was. Lyra intended to kill him. Dean saw the blade coming. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and helpless anger. But his body, still caught in the illusion, felt completely frozen, unable to move or react. Then, Dean felt a sudden, chilling sensation, like ice spreading through his veins. Right after that, a sharp, searing pain exploded in his chest. The blade had hit him. In that agonizing moment, Dean knew. This was it. He was going to die. The battle was over, and he had lost. But just as darkness began to close in, a powerful jolt shot through Dean's body. It wasn't pain. It was a sudden rush of cold energy, like a huge electric shock hitting him. The feeling was strange. It was cold, yet it felt like a powerful shockwave. This sudden burst of energy was trying to push something out of him, something holding him trapped. With a loud, cracking sound, the illusion around Dean shattered into a million tiny pieces like glass breaking. The nightmare vanished completely, leaving him in the real room again. Dean gasped, sucking in a huge breath of air. His eyes snapped open, blinking hard, trying to understand what had just happened. The cold jolt still tingled in his body. He was back in the dusty old room. Lyra stood in front of him, her spectral blade now just inches from his chest. The attack hadn't landed. He was alive. Lyra screamed, a cry of pure anger and frustration. She couldn't believe Dean had broken free from her spell. Her face twisted into a snarl. Standing calmly at the doorway, with his cane resting beside him, was Dawn. His blind eyes, usually still, were now fixed on Lyra, glowing faintly. He had saved Dean. As Dawn stood there, a soft blue light slowly started to glow around him. It was a gentle, quiet light, but it filled the space around him with a sense of calm and power. This was a sign of his unique hunter abilities. Dawn had used his special Senib ability. This rare power allowed him to reach into the minds of others, to touch their thoughts and feelings. He had used it to connect with Dean, to find him in the middle of Lyra's dark spell. Dawn had entered Dean's mind just at the perfect moment. He broke through the bad dream Lyra had trapped Dean in, right when the spectral blade was about to hit him. Dawn's timing was perfect, saving Dean's life. With a surge of his Senib power, Dawn completely shattered the Mangkukulam's powerful illusion. The fake world Lyra had built inside Dean's mind exploded into nothingness, leaving Dean free to see reality again. Dawn's sudden appearance completely changed the fight. His calm, strong presence made Lyra stumble. The battle, which had been going badly for Dean, now began to turn around. Lyra was shocked and angry. Her careful plan had been ruined by Dawn's sudden action. Her focus, which had been completely on hurting Dean, was now broken, split between her anger and the new threat. Dean felt a surge of new energy, like a powerful electric shock, run through his body. He let out a loud roar, full of new strength and determination. He was ready to fight harder than ever. Dean knew his brother had just saved his life, and he wouldn't let Dawn's effort be wasted. He would fight with all his might, making sure Lyra paid for her evil deeds and for almost killing him. With renewed power, Dean swung his flaming buntot pagi. The whip sliced through the air, burning bright, and he aimed it directly at Lyra's chest, right where he knew her evil heartbeat. The flaming whip struck Lyra hard. It hit her chest with a powerful impact, and the fire burned deeply into her dark magical form. She recoiled. the heat searing her. Lyra shrieked, a terrible sound of pure agony and burning anger. It was a scream that showed how much pain she was in, and how much fury she felt at being hurt. As the fire burned her, Lyra's body began to crackle and spark with dark energy. The air around her shimmered, showing the powerful magic trying to hold her together but starting to break. Dean didn't give Lyra a chance to recover. He kept his attack going, pressing forward with fierce determination. He knew he had to finish her before she could try another trick. With all his remaining power, Dean lunged at Lyra. He poured every bit of his strength and magic into this final push, ready to end the battle once and for all. At the same time, Dean's wolf familiar leaped. It burst forward with incredible speed, aiming for Lyra, ready to tear into her and finish her off. And from above, his firebird familiar dove down, a fiery arrow aimed at the Mangkukulam. It swooped, spitting fire, adding its power to Dean's final attack. Lyra tried to fight back, summoning faint shields of dark magic. But she was too weakened by Dean's previous attacks and Dawn's interference. Her power flickered, barely holding on. She tried to create more illusions, twisting the air around her with fading visions. But her magic was too weak, and the illusions barely formed before disappearing. Dean didn't even look at the weak illusions. His eyes were locked onto Lyra, his focus sharp and unwavering. He saw only her, the source of all the pain and suffering. With a powerful thrust, Dean plunged his hand deep into Lyra's chest. He didn't hesitate, his grip firm. He tore out a dark, pulsing orb from within her, which glowed with evil energy. The dark, pulsing orb in Dean's hand was Lyra's heart. It wasn't a normal heart. It was twisted and black, completely corrupted by the evil magic she had used for so long. This was the source of her terrible power. As Dean held her dark heart, Lyra's body gave out. It crumbled, turning into dust and ash, and slowly faded away. She was gone, defeated, her evil magic no longer holding her together. As Lyra's body vanished, a heavy old book dropped to the floor from where she stood. It was bound in dark leather, looking ancient and powerful. Dean knew immediately what it was. This was the Grimoire, Lyra's book of dark spells. It was the very book she had used to bring the dead hunters back to life, and to do all her other evil magic. The Grimoire pulsed with a terrible dark energy. Even from a distance, Dean could feel its bad magic, a strong, foul power that filled the air around it. It was full of evil. Dean knew this book had to be destroyed. If it fell into the wrong hands, more evil could be done. He couldn't let such a powerful source of dark magic exist. With a strong resolve, Dean raised his foot. He stomped down hard on the Grimoire, crushing it under his boot. He pressed down with all his might, wanting to smash every last bit of its evil. As the Grimoire was crushed, a burst of dark energy shot outwards from it, like a tiny black explosion. It flared for a moment, then quickly vanished, leaving nothing but dust. With Lyra defeated and her Grimoire destroyed, the room finally became completely silent. The unnatural quiet returned, but this time it felt peaceful, a sign that the evil was truly gone. The air in the room felt lighter, the heavy feeling of dark magic lifting. But even with the Mangkukulam gone, a sense of consequence remained. The fight was over, but its effects would linger. Dean felt himself slump, completely exhausted. The long, hard fight had taken everything out of him. He was tired, sore, and deeply drained. He looked at his Aggie mat tattoos. The wolf and the firebird, which had been so bright and strong, now shimmered weakly. Their magic was fading like a light bulb running out of power. The glowing outlines of his tattoos began to dim, becoming less and less visible. They were starting to disappear, melting back into his skin as their power left them. The wolf familiar tattoo, which had burst to life with such power, now completely dissolved. It became thin, faint lines of ink on his arm, no longer looking like a living creature. The firebird familiar, which had soared so fiercely, flickered one last time. Then, it completely disappeared from his chest, leaving only the faint marks of the tattoo behind. Dean tried to call them back, to bring his familiars to life again. He pushed his magic, but nothing happened. The tattoos remained dull, lifeless ink on his skin. The fight had been very costly. Dean had won, but he had paid a high price. His special Aggie mat, his unique tattoos, were completely drained of power. Using his unique, powerful Aggie mat tattoos and fighting such a strong Mangkukulam had completely drained him of his magic. He felt empty, with almost no power left inside. This meant that most of his familiars, the magical creatures he could summon from his tattoos, were now unusable. They wouldn't come to his aid anymore. He knew it would take a long, long time to recharge his tattoos and bring his familiars back. He wouldn't be able to summon them for any coming battles. Dean's whole body ached, every muscle screaming in protest. His mind felt raw and tired, like it had been scraped clean. The pain was deep, a reminder of the brutal fight he had just won. Dawn, moving slowly and calmly, started to walk towards Dean. His cane tapped softly on the dusty floor, the sound steady and quiet in the newly silent room. When Dawn reached Dean, he stopped. His voice was calm and soft, a peaceful sound after the chaos. Dawn asked, "Are you all right, Dean?" He wanted to make sure his brother was truly okay. Dean nodded, still trying to catch his breath. His chest heaved as he pulled in air, slowly recovering from the fight. He was tired but alive. Dean looked at his brother. No words were needed. A silent thank you passed between them, a shared understanding of what had just happened and how Dawn had saved him. The feeling of unfriendliness between them was still there, a quiet tension that had been between them for years. But underneath it, something much deeper existed, a bond that went beyond their differences. Dawn had, without a doubt, saved Dean's life. If he hadn't shown up, if he hadn't used his Sanib power, Dean would have been killed by Lyra's illusion. Together, the two brothers had stopped the Mangkukulam. Lyra and her dark magic were gone, and the reanimated hunters would no longer rise. But even with Lyra gone, a deep fear remained. Dean knew that this was just one part of a bigger problem. The true danger was still out there. Someone else was still hiding in the shadows, pulling the strings. Someone had helped Lyra. Someone was behind all of this, and they hadn't been found yet. The reanimated hunters, the Mangkukulam, all of it was just a small piece of a much larger, darker plan. Dean could feel it, a chilling sense that bigger threats were coming. Dean knew in his heart that the fight was far from over. This was only the beginning of a long and dangerous journey. More enemies would appear. He had won this battle, but he was now weaker. His tattoos were gone, his power drained. He was in a tough spot, and he knew it. He would have to find new ways to fight, new strategies to use. He couldn't rely on his familiars anymore, not for a long time. He would have to adapt quickly. The path ahead would be much harder now. He would face dangers without his usual powers, making every step more risky. He braced himself for what was to come. Dean looked down at the dusty remains of the Grimoire, now just broken bits of leather and paper. Lyra's evil book was destroyed, a small victory in the grand scheme. One threat was gone, one evil witch defeated. But the true enemy, the one orchestrating everything, still lurked in the shadows. Their identity and full plan remained a mystery. The night was still long, and the city slept on, unaware of the battles being fought in its hidden corners. Dean knew his work was far from finished. The danger was still very real, always present. He had to stay vigilant, always ready, because the magical world was growing more unstable. Dean closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. He needed to gather what little strength he had left, to prepare for whatever came next. He wouldn't give up. Dean knew he couldn't stop, even though he was tired. He had to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it got. The safety of everyone, both magical and human, rested on his shoulders. The Witching Hour, his secret organization, relied on hunters like him. They needed him to protect the Veil and fight the monsters. He couldn't let them down. More than that, all of humanity depended on him, even if they didn't know it. If the Veil broke, or if Hell's Gate opened, their world would be in terrible danger. He was their secret protector. He thought of Maya, her worried phone call. She had seen his danger, and she had acted fast to warn Dawn. Her care warmed him, a small light in the darkness. He thought of Dawn, his brother, appearing just in time. Dawn's rescue had been perfect, saving Dean from what would have been his end. A deep sense of gratitude filled Dean. Looking at Dawn, Dean realized something important. He wasn't truly alone in this fight. He had allies, people who cared and would stand by him, even when things were tough. That thought, that he wasn't alone, gave him a small flicker of hope. It was a tiny spark in the dark, but it was enough to keep him going. Slowly, carefully, Dean pushed himself up from the wall. His body protested, but he ignored the pain. He was standing, ready to face whatever came next. Outside, the city slept peacefully, quiet and unaware. People were dreaming, safe in their beds, never knowing the battle that had just been fought in the dark shadows of their world. Dean knew his work as a hunter was never truly done. There was always another threat, another monster, another evil waiting to cross over. It was an endless fight. The Veil, The magical wall separating worlds was getting weaker. He could feel it, a subtle thinning of the magic that kept the worlds apart. This meant more danger. More horrors, more encanto would surely cross over into the human world. They would bring chaos and destruction, and Dean had to be ready to stop them. He had to be prepared for the next one, the next monster, the next traitor. There was no rest for a hunter, not when so much was at stake. He looked down at his arms, at the fading tattoos where his powerful familiars once appeared. They were almost invisible now, their magic completely spent. He knew it would take time and great effort, but he would find a way to recharge them. He would make them strong again no matter what sacrifices he had to make. He always found a way. That was Dean's strength, his stubborn refusal to give up. He always adapted, always pushed forward. The air in the room was still heavy, but now with a different smell. It smelled of ozone like after a lightning strike, and of burnt magic, the lingering scent of Lyra's defeat. The Mangkukulam's dark power, though broken, still lingered in the very essence of the place. It was a faint echo, a chilling reminder of the evil that had been there. Dean shivered, but not from cold. It was a deep internal shiver, a reaction to the terrible things he had faced and the evil he had battled. The experience had been harrowing. He looked at Dawn, who simply stood there waiting. Dawn didn't press him, didn't ask more questions. He understood. Brothers didn't always need words. Dean and Dawn stood together, not speaking. They didn't need words. They shared a deep understanding, a silent way of talking that only brothers who had been through so much could have. They both understood the heavy burden they carried as hunters. It was a secret job, a big responsibility. They knew what they had to do to protect the world, and it was a heavy weight on their shoulders. The sacrifice they made was constant. They gave up normal lives, normal friendships, normal sleep. It was a never-ending giving of themselves, always in danger, always fighting. The danger was unending. There was no true break, no real peace. New monsters, new dark plans, always seemed to be waiting just around the corner, ready to attack. Dean knew, with his familiars gone, that he would have to use his other fighting skills. He had to be smart, to find new ways to win battles. He knew he had to quickly learn to fight differently. But he still had his boon-taught Paggy. The special whip, his most trusted weapon, was still powerful. It was a strong Aggie mat, and he knew it would still help him fight any monster. And his potions, the ones he carried on his belt, would still help him. They could heal him, give him strength, and help him move faster when he needed it. They were a good aid, but losing his familiars, the wolf and the firebird, was a big problem. They were like his loyal friends in battle, and now they were gone. It was a significant blow to his fighting power. Without them, Dean felt more exposed. He felt like he had less protection, less help in a fight. It made him feel more vulnerable, like he was standing in the open. After the long fight, the silence in the room was finally complete. The crackling, the screams, the sounds of battle were all gone. Only a deep quiet remained. There were no more illusions playing tricks on his mind, no more shambling zombies to fight, no more terrible screams from Lyra. Everything bad was gone. Just the two brothers, Dean and Dawn, stood in the quiet room. They were in the aftermath, the calm that came after the storm, together. Outside the old building, the night itself seemed to hold its breath. The city was unusually still, as if it too was recovering from the hidden battle that had just ended. Dean felt a strange mix of feelings. There was a sense of relief that the Mangkukulam was defeated, but a cold dread also settled in his stomach, knowing more was coming. He had survived this fight, barely. He was tired and weakened, but he was alive. That was something to hold on to, a small victory in a bigger war. But what terrible challenges awaited him next? What new evils would rise? The questions hung heavy in the air, a sign of the dangers yet to come.
Shadows creep where the old truths sleep. City lights blur what secrets stir. From lagging streets to the city's heart, a row hunter's feet playing a dangerous part. 15 years since the cleansing scar. Now the veil's thin, not far, not far. Monsters crawl beyond the wall. gonna make 'em fall.